Thank you, John and Suki. That's right. I am Craig Treadway. A verdict is expected at any moment in the Sean Bell shooting trial. We're going to have a bit of perspective on the case. Let's just start it off by saying this all happened November 25th, 2006. The officers were involved in the shooting outside of Club Kahlua. Again, security and tension is high outside of the courthouse right now. We're going to talk to someone who is no stranger to the judge, who has a tremendous amount of responsibility in this case. With us now, James Kousouros, criminal defense attorney. James, thank you for being with us this morning. You are no stranger to this judge. Tell us what you think we can expect from this judge, especially the candor.
Well, good morning, Craig. I know Judge Cooperman for many years, and I've practiced before him. And Judge Cooperman is a scrupulously honest and intellectual jurist. He is, in my opinion, going to call this case as he sees it. He's going to find the facts as they were presented to him. And remember, it's his job as the fact finder to determine whether or not the case has been proven beyond a reasonable doubt. And that's what he's going to do. It was a long trial. There were several witnesses. There were several conflicting accounts. And I think without regard to whatever reaction there may be or may not be, Judge Cooperman is going to call it the way he sees it. All
right. Now, I have to ask you, it was the officers who decided to waive a jury trial in this case and have the case decided by Judge Cooperman. Your thoughts on that particular strategy for them?
You know, I was not obviously involved in that decision-making, and I have to say it was obviously a very, very difficult decision. You have the tensions in the public and in the media that surrounded this incident and the allegations being thrown about by both sides, and given the highly tense atmosphere within which this case was tried, obviously it was a decision of the officers and their counsel that trying it before a judge who would hopefully not be affected by these outside influences was the better way to go.
Now, the families of course, Sean Bell and Trent Benefield and Joseph Guzman are expecting, their expectation is a conviction and jail time for these officers. Now, Mark Cooper notwithstanding, Mark Cooper, the officer who was charged with 2 counts of reckless endangerment, those are misdemeanors. Mark Oliver and guest guard Nora face some serious charges here that could result in 25 years in prison. Let's go over some of those charges right now, if you will.
Well, the top count is manslaughter in the first degree on an intentional theory. It's a B violent, as we call it, and it calls for a 5 to 25 year potential sentence with mandatory jail time. The lesser count, the manslaughter in the second degree, does leave open the possibility for the court to sentence them to probation and up to 5 to 15 years in prison. Interestingly, though, both of those counts, they differ in seriousness, but they also differ in their theory. The manslaughter in the first degree, the more serious charge, is predicated upon an intentional theory, whereas the second count, manslaughter in the second degree, is predicated on a reckless theory. The assault counts, there are 2 counts of assault in the first degree. Those 2 are B felonies and carry mandatory jail time. So these charges are most serious. The penalties that could be imposed are indeed quite serious.
Now, one of the recurring themes here is the term recklessness as it relates to these charges. Now, of course, we all know much of the incidents surrounding this. Guest guard Nora was the officer involved in the initial gunfire, which led to 11 shots from him. Mark Oliver allegedly shooting 31 times, reloading once. And again, when you start speaking of recklessness, I think earlier on you were saying that this is probably going to have to play into the judge's decision whether or not he acquits or convicts these officers of these serious charges, which again are felonies.
Well, the term recklessness under the law requires a finding that these officers failed to perceive a risk that their conduct would result in death. Whereas the intentional crimes are that they intended, their conscious objective was that their conduct would result in what they're accused of doing, in the shooting death of Mr. Bell. These are two completely different standards. And very interestingly, if you look at the way the case was tried, both sides in this case essentially have claimed justification. On the one hand, the officers are claiming that Isnora followed them to Mr. Bell's vehicle because he had overheard a conversation in which guns were discussed, and there was banter back and forth and an argument, and I believe he testified in the grand jury that he overheard one of Mr. Bell's friends say, "Go get my gun," or something like that. So he followed them to the vehicle thinking that they were going to get a gun and that there was going to be an armed confrontation. And so from their perspective, when Mr. Bell moved that vehicle and hit them with it and then continued moving, that they were justified in firing the first shots. On the other hand, the closing argument, for example, of the prosecution and the evidence that they put forward in an effort to convince the judge was that Mr. Bell was justified in using his vehicle in self-defense after the officers, who the prosecution claimed unannounced, began shooting. So it's an interesting theory because both sides in claiming justification are essentially saying, I did what I did, but I was justified in doing it, which is different from reckless, which is I didn't intend, or there wasn't no real intention.
We're going to have much more on that and hopefully more information on the acquittals and the exact reasons for the acquittals. Again, guest guard is Nora, Mark Oliver, and Mark Cooper, all acquitted. That is what we are hearing from the courtroom right now, acquitted of all charges in the shooting death of Sean Bell and the wounding of Joseph Guzman and Trent Benefield on November 25th, 2006. James Kousouros is here with us live. James, your thoughts on the verdict? Any surprises here?
Well, in the testimony that I observed and the extent to which I was able to follow the trial, I suspect that the inconsistencies in the testimony and in the stories that were put forth had to have played a tremendous role in Justice Cooperman's decision. I hasten to add, and it's very, very important, that what this means simply and solely is that Justice Cooperman has decided that the prosecution did not prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt. It is not any type of edict as to what Sean Bell and his friends did or didn't do, and so on. I don't know the extent to which Judge Cooperman will explain his decision. I don't know the extent to which he will actually put forth his fact-finding. But that's what it means, and that is what our system is based upon. And while I expect, we all expect that somebody would have been saddened and even maddened by whatever verdict was rendered, we do need to respect the system and respect the fact that this is the court's finding, be it by a court or a jury.
Exactly. In the end, this all really is going to boil down to the facts presented in the case as they were presented to Judge Cooperman, and also, I guess, a look at the powers that police officers are given in terms of responding to a situation with deadly force. I mean, we have to talk about the initial shooting, the initial incident that touched off the shooting. An officer fearing that his life was in danger, Officer guest guard is Nora, firing the first shots into that car that was being driven by Sean Bell.
Well, exactly, and we have to be grateful on the one hand that our law enforcement are given that authority, that they make mistakes, that perhaps they could commit a crime is something that we all understand. But the fact remains that when investigators, law enforcement are in a situation in which they feel that their lives are threatened, they are trained and they are required to react appropriately. And the question here was whether or not they acted appropriately, but to a criminal extent. And that's something that cannot be lost upon anybody. They were charged with intentionally killing a man during the discharge of their duties, not just making a mistake, not being wrong about what their perception was. This is the burden of proof that's required in our country in order to convict and imprison somebody, and the verdict is simply saying you did not prove that level of intent or maliciousness, if you will,
and we're talking criminal intent.
Exactly, exactly.